Hello, I'm Joshua, and I'm here to dispel a myth about Scribe Online connectors. They're not hard to build, they're very easy, they can be very fast, and you can get them deployed and get to working on your solution very quickly. And that's what Connector Outlaws is all about. It's about building your connector, getting it out there, and doing it quickly and fast. Hello, I'm Joshua Solomon. I work for Scribe Software, and today's guest, we have Fuzz Schroeder, the author of the Fast Connector Framework. How you doing, Fuzz?
Good.
All right, so previously we talked about a couple of different ways that we can build connectors to work with Scribe Online. We have the Connector Development Kit, which we did talk about in depth, and we have the Fast Framework. Both are free. Both are available to anyone who uses the Scribe Online platform, and whether you build a connector in either one, they can both be certified and used in your organization in Scribe Online. We did talk about with the Connector Development Kit that there are 4 major components to all connectors: connections, metadata, queries, and operations. Both the Fast Connector Framework and the Connector Development Kit give you access to build these objects, or build these methods into the connector. And today we're going to be talking about the Fast Framework. So tell us what the Fast Framework does.
Well, the Fast Framework was originally designed to make it easy to build proof of concept connectors, but then we found it's useful for building, in general, simple HTTP connectors. So if you have an HTTP service, it'll enable you to quickly build connectivity to that HTTP service by mapping HTTP concepts to Scribe concepts and back.
Good.
So it's designed to do that as quickly as we can make it, and so that's the goal, is to get the user up and building connectivity as quickly as possible.
Good. That sounds exciting. I guess we've discovered that in a lot of connectors, there's a commonality amongst a whole bunch of different APIs out there, where a lot of folks are switching to this HTTP REST-based concept, and so we've kind of wrapped up some of that so that we can wizardize it and make it quick.
Exactly. So one of the things we're trying to do is take out all the common things that you have to do for HTTP services, and just surface the invariants to the user so that they can configure how the specifics of their service. So what's the URLs that you have to call, what are the underlying JSON structures that you're using, what are the headers, what are the query parameters, and things like that. So we have a little bit of framework code that will map those values to Scribe concepts and back and forth.
Good. All right. So the Fast Framework does have an installation wizard. It creates a Visual Studio template, and when you execute that template, we have a wizard where we're going to be filling in some information. So here's a screenshot of the wizard, but why don't we just go right into the wizard itself and talk me through what I'm going to be doing here, Fuzz. So I'm going to hit New Project here, and I am going to choose my Fast Connector Framework here.
Yeah, so this is just a project template in Visual Studio that sets up some things for you, and the initial wizard will be actually the precursor to those 4 things that you do, the registration concept in Scribe Online. You have to build out some variables for a connector, such as the connector type ID, the name of the connector, and how it's used and things like that. And we try to help you set that up initially with the right values and then place those in the right areas in code to get the project off to a good start.
Okay, so I have the wizard up here, and it looks like my connector type ID is already put in here for me. Is that generated new each time someone opens the wizard?
It is. So it's generated with a brand new GUID every time you use that. If you do want to go back and use a GUID, which typically you don't have to do very often, but if you want to start over again, you can paste that value in as well.
Okay, so that the platform would recognize it as an existing connector or a new version of an existing connector.
Yes.
All right, so I have a service in mind that we're going to work with. It's a TextBell SMS messaging service that allows you to send text messages. And so my idea is that I think that an administrator might want a text message to indicate to them that a Scribe process has taken place or an emergency is about to take place. So I'm going to build a text connector here, and so I'm going to put in some information here. And connector name, any rules here?
It should separate. Should be
I gotta
able
type
to
correctly.
strip out some of the characters if you have spaces and things like that.
Okay.
There is a length limitation.
And so the name of the service is actually called text belt. So that's what I'm going to. So I'm going to insert some of this information and hit the build project. What happens when I build the project here?
Essentially, there's a template that it's filling in the values for your particular connector within the template, and then starting you off on a new project with some framework in place and some references to DLLs that we need for the fast framework to work.
Okay, so it's actually building me a connector that I could actually hit compile on, and it would just be empty, or?
It would. There's some. We start you out with some initial values. I think it's username and password for the connection screen, and then some basic auth. But we don't really know your URL yet, so it won't go to any particular place that you're expecting it to.
Okay.
But it will compile, and it would actually register as a proper connector. The metadata won't be very interesting at this point because we haven't really given it much information about this, and most likely the calls won't really go anywhere.
Okay. All right, so some of this information is going to be preloaded for us. So let's go back and see what the status of our connector is, and we can see that there's a connector here, and there's some information here that I recognize. I can see connector settings, which we talked about previously, and it looks like it's all filled out for me. And let's take a look. What else do we have going on here? We have our connector information here.
I'm going to fix that text build there.
Let's take a look.
That's a bug in this version right here. You need to. This will be fixed.
All right, so we'll put that connector name inside of quotes, and that'll be one of the items that our wizard will take care of for us in the future. All right, so again, we've got a connector here, and we don't have a whole lot of code here, but it looks like some information's already put together for us. We have, tell me what this is here. We have our connection configuration.
Let's start up at the properties at the top there.
Okay.
You've got there's 3 properties that we start you off with: username, password, and base URL. And essentially, any properties that are on this class here are going to be surfaced as connection properties when you try to create a connection for this particular connector.
Oh, so the UI in the Scribe Online Connection Manager is built off of just these 3 parameters right
Yes.
here?
So if you take one of those away, you're going to remove that from the connection screen. If you add one, you'll get that value as well. And when you connect, those values will be populated by the values that were put into the connection screen.
Oh, so unlike the connector development kit where we had to actually list out and build a form for each one of the fields that we want to be shown in our credential screen, all we really have to do is add them right here.
Yes. Underneath.
That makes things a lot easier.
It should. The goal here is just to make it as quick as possible, and we're using reflection behind the scenes to build up that form what you have anyway.
Okay. And it looks like our connection method is put together here. We see configure with basic auth. Basic auth is a base 64 encoded URL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a common pattern for HTTP services to use this for authentication. So we have a helper method in here which will help you configure that with just the password and the username, which is what is required for that.
So for basic auth, again, I haven't written any code here, but it looks like my connection form and my connection methods are already put together for me. I don't have to do anything here, do I?
If all you need at this point is the base URL and basic auth, and this would work properly for you.
Great.
And, sometimes these HTTP servers do have variations from the standard patterns that we see. So if that were the case, then you'd have to go and figure out what those variations are and then encode them in the pattern here. But
okay.
For most basic auth, this should work fine.
Okay. All right, so the next item on my list is always metadata. So I don't have any metadata defined here, and I want to define metadata. My understanding is this is almost a cut and paste operation that I need to do. You want to help me out here?
Yeah, so what you need to figure out is, and typically we're talking about JSON at this point when we're talking about these kind of services.
Okay.
We need to find some JSON, which it looks like you have here.
Yep, I have JSON. This is my metadata for my text messaging, and it's just these 3 fields, and this is a sample result set that I have.
Okay, so what we're doing here is we're going to take the JSON sample that you have, and using some tools in Visual Studio, paste those as .NET classes, which the JSON serializer is going to use to go back and forth between, and then we're going to leverage those .NET classes to get the metadata.
Okay.
And then we're going to compile that behind the scenes and surface that
Okay.
in the appropriate.
So I'm going to copy this and come over here. Can I paste here in this class? Is it cleaner to put it someplace else?
Well, we've already included a models folder, and I'd recommend that that's where you put things. And we've included 2 really simple classes just to make it all compile. These typically you'll want to replace with your actual models.
All right, so I want to replace this item model. I'm going to come up here and I have a paste and a paste special. Looks like I have a paste JSON as a class. Is that all I need to do?
That is what you're looking for.
All right. All right.
So you got to make sure that that's the correct version of the JSON. So it looks like there's probably an extra field in there or bracket.
Let's take a look. Do I have an extra?
I think you need commas in there.
Oh, I do need commas in there. Look at that.
See if that works.
And we'll paste that JSON as a class. And look at that. It comes up. I have a root object here with my 3 items. And that's my metadata?
Yes, we will use that as your metadata. And you might have additional calls that you want to add to the metadata, and the framework will merge those for you as is appropriate for the system.
All right.
So that's a real live demo you got going there.
Great, great. All right. All right, so that seems pretty easy. I didn't have to do any code for the connection form. I didn't have to do any code for the connection. And for my metadata, all I had to do was paste into a class. So now I'm wondering where I'm actually going to get to do some coding here. I've got, again, our text belt SMS connector example. This service has a single call, and so I want to do that call. It is a post call that I have to make. Okay. So where would I put a post call in this code?
Okay, so it's important to understand what it is you're trying to do here. So for example, you give us the information about it's a post call. That's information we need. We need to know also what the headers are, or any query parameters are going to be, what the URL is, what the URL extensions are. So that's the kind of information that you're going to be configuring here to build the mapping to the actual call. And then the framework itself will do the underlying plumbing to get that back into Scribe Online.
Okay.
So for example, so we changed the item there. So let's first just, we have a new type there for the queries. Let's fix that. Just
this guy right here?
Red squiggly drives me crazy.
All right, so over in the item, we see that it pasted in as root object. Can I change that?
Yeah, you can change the name of that.
All right, so if I were to change that back to, hey, this is my item, does that work for, let's take a look.
That will almost work.
Okay, it looks like it resolved the conflict.
It did. The root now will be a little bit off, but we'd have to fix that for the actual scenario. The root is essentially what's coming back from a query.
Okay.
I don't think you're actually going to have any queries in this example, so you might want to just comment out that section.
Oh, okay.
Or take out the item in there and return an empty list.
Can we just comment that out, right?
You can comment that out and then take the item out there. I think you have to return something. It has to be an empty list of
I see. So I have to tell it I have a list of
queries,
and even if that list is empty, I still have to give it my list.
Right. So
Okay.
right here, you just said that I don't have any entities that support query,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay.
So the empty, and you have to
All
return
right,
the empty
again,
list.
another easy, quick fix from a template that's given to me.
Okay. And now, so what you're doing is essentially an operation. So you're creating data or setting data, or making something happen as opposed to getting data. So we're gonna configure an operation here.
Okay. Well, for the sake of time, I've cheated a little bit. I do have an operation that I have already pre-built, so I'm going to copy that and paste it into this operations section here. And let's talk about what that actually does for me. So here, let's tab that in to make it a little bit more readable. Here I have an operation that we've already talked about in the past, and so let's talk about where this is. I can see that immediately I have a conflict here. I didn't actually call our metadata in here SMS send. We actually called it item. So if we change that, does that work?
Capital I.
All right, so let's capitalize that. And this, it should actually be SMS,
Right, that's the
because
variable.
that's the variable that I created here.
Exactly.
So let's talk about what this does for us.
All right. Well, so you're using, there's a bunch of extension methods as well to configure operations here, but right here you're kind of explicitly spelling out all the things that it does. Essentially, you're creating an operation called SMS send with a known type of create.
All right, so that maps to those operations that I've talked to our audience before about.
Mm-hmm.
We have create, update, insert update, delete, etc. So this is one of our known items, our known actions in relation to the connector development kit.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the next parameter is the URL for, so that's going to be appended to the base URL, and then the operation is going to be posted there because your next parameter is a post, and that's the HTTP method for
Okay,
the
so
operation.
if we go back to the base URL, that's a parameter that I've put in the credentials screen. So the user needs to only put in the base URL of the service, and then each one of my REST calls can specify a unique URL for it.
That's true. Actually, in the client in the connection configuration method above, we passed in that base URL value.
Okay, I see that up
From then
here.
on, after you connect, we're going to use that base URL.
Okay, so we don't even have to worry about that. Again, that's on the user to deal with that. Okay. And then we post. So can I support any HTTP method in here?
Yes. So
what are
that's
my
a
options?
string. You will be able to support any method that is an HTTP. So if you post in a patch, it will patch.
Okay.
So it'll translate that. We do have some built-in helper methods that use gets and posts for the defaults. So for queries, we'll default you to get, so you don't have to supply that information because we're going to assume it's a get. There's some helper methods that would allow you to create without putting in the names of these things, and it would default to names like create and using a post HTTP method.
Okay. All right, so after that, I see that we've got a couple of dot notation here, from input to form, from response to item, and accept JSON. Tell me about these items.
All right, so essentially how this works is there is a finite number of places in Scribe Online where you can get data from.
Okay.
And there's a finite number of places where that data can be mapped to in HTTP. So for example, in HTTP you have URLs, query parameters, headers, forms, and body, and we can map from in Scribe Online the connection screen, the entities on the one side, and on queries the conditional clauses.
Okay.
So we can map those things through, and so the basic concept behind this is to map. These extension methods are built to help you map from one area to the other. So in this case, it's a from the input, which is the entity that's coming into that's been mapped from Scribe Online.
Okay.
And we're going to take that value and map it to the form, which is a particular type of body in an HTTP method. So that's going to be, in HTTP you can have either a body, which is a string that's typically serialized JSON or something like that, or you can use a form, and in this case it's a mapping to the number on the form. So we're going to map that value to the number entry in the form for this HTTP call.
Okay, so my phone number and the message I want to send, I'm mapping to the number and message parameter in my text belt post call.
And then the from response method is going to take the results that are coming back as an item and paste those back in for any subsequent calls. Okay,
and so that would be, in this case, I can look at my metadata and the response is actually going to be my success, my yes or no success here.
Correct.
Okay.
And that could be also used for things on creates where you did something like you wanted to get the ID back. That's how you'd map it back into the system.
Right.
And then accept JSON as a helper method to add in the appropriate headers to make it work with JSON.
Okay, so that's our HTTP header. And so there are a number of other things that we can do, and if I use IntelliSense here, I can see that we have a whole bunch. And you were talking about some helper methods that default. So it looks like I have an asGet.
So yeah, asGet will just change the method to be a get. And then as HTTP method will allow you to put in whatever method you want as a string and overwrite that value. And there's a bunch of, from context, you can put values into context. There's a whole bunch of methods there that are mappings from one area to another.
So I'm not limited to just adding parameters into an HTTP form. I can actually create header parameters from my input into Scribe Online as well.
Yes.
Okay, and so I can see here the IntelliSense tells me that I've got a lot of things that I can do, and I can also take, here's the from response. We just talked about from response. So we've got both data going in and coming out of our service, and it's all accessible here in essentially a single call.
Right, and the goal here is to map from all the possible things that we see as patterns in actual web services. So a lot of these came from using this framework for some proof of concepts, and then finding that there were some additional capabilities that we needed, so we baked those into the framework as well. And the goal is to moving forward to bake additional patterns in as we see them. Okay.
So it looks like, Fuzz, thank you. It looks like I have a single line of code for each one of my REST calls, and everything else, save for the pasting of the metadata, was built for me. And I should be able to build this?
Should build.
All right, so let's compile it. And look at that. We have a compiled connector that I can now go and put into my local agent and test, sending SMS messages to any phone in the country. All right, that was pretty quick. So let's go back and take a look at our program here. We had the preloaded connection information that allowed us to do either no authorization or basic auth. We pasted our metadata in. We created a single operation with this command here, and we talked about what each one of those items do, and we were done. We were able to compile and test our connector. That is a fast framework, Fuzz.
That is the goal, so hopefully we succeeded.
All right, and we're going to continue working on this. The framework will evolve and become simpler over time, even more so.
Right, so you showed a little bit of the wizard screen at the beginning of the project template.
Yep.
We will be adding to that to make it simpler to get you a little bit further down the road.
Even further than we already were, huh?
Yeah, so we're going to ask some questions early on about what kind of connector you're going to build. Is it going to be basic auth or no auth? And we're going to ask some things like that. Is it going to be JSON or XML? And we'll see how far we progress when we get there. But the goal is to get you started and ask you as many upfront questions as we can without being confusing at that point, and then get the connector into as good a shape as we can from that first initial stage.
All right, that's exciting. It sounds like we're going to have a whole bunch of new connectors on the platform soon if it's this easy to get our products connected. All right, so we're going to wrap up here. Here's our resources screen. We've talked about getting to the help and the training and the tutorials. It's just a refresher here, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.